Das Boot is a 1981 historic West German film that was written and directed by Wolfgang Petersen, which follows the U-boat U-96 and its crew as they take on the horrors of war, isolationism, and anxiety in a claustrophobic submarine in the middle of the Atlantic. I'm Ryan, and this is a mediocre take on Das Boot. I'm not trying to do an in-depth review on the themes that are presented in the movie, as that could be a whole nother video in itself. I'd rather just talk about the movie and scenes that really intrigued me and how Petersen used certain techniques to pull in the audience into a story about German submariners during World War II. The movie mostly takes place on the U-boat as it fights and hides its way through the murky waters of the Atlantic where depth charges can destroy the sub with one good blow. While the movie takes place on a cramped U-boat, it was actually filmed on a makeshift sub on top of a Riddler that was able to move the boat up to 45 degrees and shake it to mimic the feelings of huge waves crashing on the boat. The crew would also be blasted with cold water when the crew would be on the bridge to recreate how rough it was. This, with the inclusion of also keeping the actors without sunlight for filming of the movie, followed Petersen's goal to guide the audience through a journey to the edge of the mind. This recreation forced the actors into only a slither of what was going through the actual crew members' heads. Das Boot is a chaotic movie in which the only victory the crew feels is that to survive another attack. But this isn't about the Axis versus Allies. It's about humans with emotions and lives who were only brought into the war to fight for their country. As an audience, we feel lost as not many people have gone on a submarine, so we are given a character to relate to. Lieutenant Warner was assigned as a war correspondent to document the crew as they fought in the Battle of the Atlantic. He's never been on a submarine, and while this is the story about a crew, follows Lieutenant Warner more closely. His reactions are the most relatable to the audience because they are raw and not battle-hardened yet. While the movie is about humans during war, I want to talk about what I thought were 3 scenes that really define the movie's goal of a journey to the edge of the mind. In the opening bar scene, right after Captain Thompson gives his glorious and also cynical speech about giving it to old Churchill, the bar fumes out into chaos with the camera chasing around the crew members with a band playing fast-paced music in the center of the room. While this scene is here to foreshadow the chaos of everyday life on the U-boat, I want to talk about what happens after. After a drunken man shoots above the crowd preaching about fight, live or die, everyone ducks and we're left with an intoxicated Lieutenant Warner standing, who quickly realizes he's got to open the hatch and shovel zombified to the restroom. When opening, he sees Captain Thompson in his own vomit with the captain of the U-96 trying to get him up. Lieutenant Warner helps up Thompson only to slip in the old man's vomit. This and the one of the chaos in the bar is there to present a little teaser of how the crew operates. Improv with the dash of leadership. That being Captain, of course, who is able to get Thompson by ordering Warner in his drunken state to help him. This becomes important when it isn't just a drunken man at stake, but the lives of all the crew members later in the film. That Captain's leadership is what provides the men with sanity among the flames. The most gut-wrenching scene that arises is that of the torpedoing of the empty ship above water. The crew has just survived a 6-hour waiting period after an onslaught from an enemy destroyer where the U-boat hit 2 ships with the torpedo. During the time, the crew had to drop the ship below the recommended level's depths in order to maneuver the depth charges and were sitting ducks. This and the feeling they got that the first 2 confirmed hits hungered the crew to see their work afterwards. The boat surfaces to a red glare of flames erupting from the ship as the captain describes it as a damn tough ship and orders for another torpedo to be shot. The impact causes a massive explosion to arise as the crew watches from afar. Members of the ship begin to come onto the deck ablaze and into the water, with the captain questioning why they weren't rescued. The pleas of the overboard men can be heard as the crew realizes what they have just done. This is not the victory they sought while being underwater for 6 hours. There's no honor to them in killing defenseless men on a boat, but because they were underwater at the time, they don't realize the horrors of what they're doing. This is the crew coming to terms with the reality that is war. When the boat is trying to break the blockade at the Strait of Gibraltar, the 8.9-mile span of water that it connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean, they get hit hard and the ship begins sinking to levels beyond any recommendation. The crew becomes stranded at the bottom of the seafloor and the pressure causes massive leaks throughout the ship. This is when we see the chaos that the crew thrives in come to life when everyone's life is on the line. This scene is jammed with water quickly filling the boats and men rushing around to fix them all while Captain doesn't break even under the intense pressure, that of being 280 meters under and keeping a level head himself. We see Johann redeem himself from almost getting court-martialed from earlier in the movie after his mental break by getting the leaks stopped in the ship, which seemed almost impossible at this level. The crew is able to come together and after 15 hours gets the ship back up to the surface. This is the victory they sought in which they were able to overcome the impossible. This is what solidified them as a crew. I just want to reflect on some artistic choices the director made as a way to fluff my video. The sounds and shots of the ship above water are what I think are the best parts of this movie. I'm a sucker for a good shot of scenery in a movie, but that in mind, how does one get a good shot of the ocean when it all looks the same? In my eyes, their purpose is as a reflection for the audience and the crew to sit down, take in what has happened or what is about to happen. You get beautiful shots, and because of this, there are scenes where the ship is almost in an equilibrium state of how calm the waters are. The sheer look of horror the scenes can portray, like the glowing red on the ship from the torpedoing from earlier. Some other great shots are that of the Spanish coastline when the boat is about to stop, and the beginning when the car is driving by the coastline. One being the opening scene of the movie where we get introduced to parts of the crew through a fire drill. Sounds are so much more important in this movie. It almost becomes like a horror movie at times when all the crew can hear is the creaks of the ship as it dives lower than the recommended levels, or when depth charges are blowing up all around them but yet they can't see them, they can only hear. Or when the sonar picks up on the ship approaching and the realization that it's getting closer with every beep is like a pressure cooker just waiting to explode. The only thing I don't like is the use of jump scares per se to jolt the audience awake. For example, anytime something happens, the audience hears the loud alarm first before anything else, which I understand is meant to put the audience in the shoes of the crew as if they were hearing it too, but it just served to annoy me and pulled me out of the movie since it would just be overly loud. That doesn't stop the movie from having some great tense moments before and after with sound alone though. One tiny little detail I enjoyed was the use of beards to tell time. With starting with baby faces, it's a great way to tell the passage of time without timestamps that most movies might do. And even by the end of the movie, the Nazi first lieutenant had finally given up on the standards and let his beard grow out, which can play on the idea of cynicism as the war drifted on and Nazi leadership. This was a long and interesting movie to watch, which came out to 3.5 hours on the Amazon version. Its use of limited space and director techniques allowed it for it to never get dull as the movie went on, considering it all takes place on a tiny boat in the middle of the Atlantic. As the movie continued, you feel so tired for the crew and what they have gone through that you almost root for their safe passage home, which at the time of the release was only 36 years after the surrender of the Germans to the Allies. With that in mind, I still think it's a great movie about humans in war and its terrifying reality. I understand there is an overabundance of video essays on YouTube, so I thought I'd just talk about something I enjoyed instead of trying to break something down to its roots. I'm a big history buff, so I made this movie really easy to watch and edit as I'm pretty passionate about movies as well. While I don't know where you might be on this earth, I hope for safe passage for you and your families. And as they say in German, Auf Wiedersehen, which means, well, I don't actually know what it means, but until we see each other again.